Hi there. This is Tune Into Gaming, a new gaming podcast. I'm North Kozar.
And I'm Quactical.
So
You might be
Oh, go ahead.
you might be wondering what this podcast is about.
So this podcast is about mostly gaming in general. We wanted to make something that would allow us to discuss various things in gaming that we're enjoying, or whether it's upcoming games, nostalgic games, and things like that. But we also wanted to be able to have a platform to talk about music, whether that's music in video games, performance music, or production and composition. Both of us enjoy creating and listening to music, but we also both enjoy and love playing games. So
That's right.
Tune Into Gaming is sort of the, I guess, brainchild, if that's the appropriate term to use here. It's the brainchild of that idea. So this is just the first of hopefully many Tune Into Gaming podcasts. But today, what are we going to talk about?
Well, our main topic is going to be about overhyping and just game releases and how content gets marketed and how the gaming community as a whole kind of assesses that content and thinks about games that are about to come out in the future. We'll later move on into a little bit of a nostalgia trip with some older games that we're still enjoying and still wanting to play. And then we'll have a fun segment. But first, we're going to start off talking about some upcoming games that we're excited about, starting with Civ 6, actually.
Yeah.
The Civilization series is a series that I've enjoyed for my whole life. I don't even remember when I first started playing Civilization. I must have been about 9 or 10. I've always loved strategy games in general, and I'm definitely very excited for this next iteration of this franchise, specifically because of the changes they've made to how the cities work. Now, if you're not familiar with Civilization, it's a strategy game where you control a small nation. You start off with one city, and you can build settlers to go and build other cities. Now, the way it works is that you have a zone of influence around that city, which controls many tiles. But in previous Civilization games, all of the buildings were stacked on the city center. So you could build as many buildings as you want, and there wasn't really a limit. So now what they're doing instead, you have to build basically these encampments on the tiles, which then you can build buildings on top of. And so this is actually going to change the game quite a bit and mean that cities actually have much more of a physical presence on the landscape, and you can see your civilization kind of change and evolve your surroundings as you progress through the ages. And so I'm really excited about this.
That sounds pretty cool. For me, strategy games aren't my forte. I definitely struggle with them a little bit, and so I haven't been as involved with the Civilization games, but I know that they're a pretty popular one, especially as far as strategy games go. And so with the city building, is it like before Civ 6, you kind of just could stack up a city and make it like this one big glob of city, and now you're saying you have to kind of like expand outward, and it like grows and changes as the timeline progresses?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's going to be a lot more. The environment that you settle your city in is going to be a lot more impactful on how the city grows and how large it can grow. I mean, it always had an influence, but it's definitely going to feel a lot more immersive in that sense, in my opinion. And I think that's something that I definitely appreciate about games, and strategy games specifically, is feeling like, you have an organic experience, right? That when you play the game, you're not just like running through the same like best practice strategy over and over again, that your gameplay experience changes and is defined by what happens to you along your journey. And I think that changes like this will really move towards that kind of feeling and that kind of theme in the game.
So it's less like trying to min-max something or meta the game to death. You're kind of, the end point is less important. It's more about how you get to the end point. So like if you want to nuke all the other civilizations, that's like your end goal, but what makes it more interesting and engaging is the strategy that takes place trying to get to that point.
Right, all the twists and turns along the way, the small decisions that you make because something happened that you didn't expect. Maybe an ally did something different, or maybe you found a resource that you weren't expecting to find. And I think those, in a lot of senses, are some of the most compelling and rewarding experiences in games, is when you have to make those on-the-fly decisions and things do change and you don't expect what comes and what happens.
Yeah, that's always more fun too, especially. And if your allies and stuff are just AI, like it's the bots, isn't it? Or can you play with other people?
Yeah, there's multiplayer as well.
Okay, well that's cool. I think that anytime you have games that allow for multiplayer, especially I would imagine strategy games that they're a lot longer. It's not like you sit down for a 10-minute first-person shooter game or Call of Duty or whatever. That there's a lot of those kind of alliance building and breaking that happens that makes that a lot of fun. And I guess again, like I haven't played a whole lot of strategy games, but if playing with the bots kind of does that too, there's like that dynamism where you get betrayed, or there's random stuff that doesn't necessarily feel random but feels plausible. Like I think that when you have some of that randomly generated things, so your ally decides to betray you, well, if there was a reason, like you had this resource that they needed, then that's kind of cool. But if it's just like, the computer rolled a 6, so now they're going to betray you, like
well, I think what they've done for this iteration of the game is they've given some of the AI leaders hidden agendas, so that they'll work with you on one level. Maybe they'll trade with you a little bit or do some diplomacy, but they will have a hidden agenda or a hidden set of goals or objectives that they don't reveal to you, that they will also make decisions based upon.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, I'm hoping that will definitely make things interesting.
Yeah. So you can kind of like try and discover what their true motives are, being like, oh, if they're allying me now,
Yeah.
Huh.
So I'm definitely hoping that adds some spice and variety to the game. Is there anything upcoming that you're excited about?
So yeah, I'm actually kind of looking forward to Watchdogs 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the first Watchdogs game was not, it was out in like 2014 or something. It wasn't the most well received. There definitely were some bugs and some issues and whatnot, but I don't know. I love the concept of Watchdogs. Like I love, for me, I love open world exploring gameplay. And so that fits into it. But just the concept was very different. It's not, you're some crime lord syndicate, whatever, going around running, gunning. It's like kind of trying to modernize some of those aspects. And so you're like this hacker and you're working with a group, to try and accomplish whatever, maybe crime based. I'm not super sure on the specifics of the story, but it just, how it incorporates the hacking mechanics seemed really cool in Watch Dogs 1. And it just didn't play out very well. And the fact that they're doing a Watch Dogs 2, despite some of the issues that they had in the first one, I think like that's sort of what makes it exciting for me. So
because they're going to have to change the formula in some way to make it better. So like, maybe they do have an idea of how they can fix it and make it actually a really great game.
Yeah, and it seems like it could really go as one of those things where they learned from their mistakes in the first one. They're like, okay, well, this is why, it wasn't as well received, because of the hacking was difficult, or it was kind of like, it broke the flow of gameplay. But I think that, it's neat that they're still like sticking with it and going through with something else. So if you don't know what Watch Dogs is, it's an action adventure game that has a pretty decent amount of stealth mechanics in it. It's third person and it's in an open world. I'm pretty sure it's set in San Francisco, or like some future version of San Francisco or whatever. And I believe in Watch Dogs 2 also the world is larger, of course, because always have to have the game environment be larger. And just like any other open world, I guess now they're quote unquote GTA styled games or whatnot. There's many different ways to go about the city, but what's interesting about it is the hacking mechanics. So you can use different methods to approach the missions, where you don't always necessarily have to go and just shoot and run and gun. There's environmental hazards as well that you can kind of control or hack, such as if you're driving and you're being chased, you can hack into the police thing and put up like a roadblock, whatever those roadblock things are that come up out of the ground and stuff like that. I don't know all of the new hacking mechanic-y things that they are going to have in Watch Dogs 2. I think they're doing more stuff with mini UAVs or drones and things as well. But something that is also really cool about Watch Dogs, or at least Watch Dogs 2, is that they're taking another approach at the multiplayer, but it also has a co-op multiplayer mode.
Oh,
and really? So you can explore the world and interact with people and do missions together. But
That sounds really exciting.
what's neat about it is I don't know how the co-op multiplayer mode differs from the like invasion mode, but when you're playing the game at any point in time, that you can like invade other players' worlds if you're playing online. So
Like Dark Souls almost?
kind of, yeah. So and this was in the first game too, that a player can join another player's single player session, and they basically are like, put viruses into their hacking system. I don't remember what it's called, but the player then has to like escape after the virus is planted, while the person whose game was invaded has to find and kill them. So it's a little different. It's kind of like someone's trying to mess up your world, and you're like, excuse me, how about not? But something new that they're adding in Watch Dogs 2 is it's called the Bounty Hunter mode, or I think it's Bounty Hunter. So if a player is playing online and they create too much chaos in their world, it kind of like automatically goes into effect, where police start going after them, and then alongside with anywhere, I think it's from 1 to 3 players, will join into their game. And those 3 players, I don't know that they're necessarily working together. I don't think that they're working against each other, but their aim is to kill the player who has the bounty on them, and they get experience points with that. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I love that sort of like seamless drop in, drop out style of gameplay with the single player aspect. It's a neat concept to me, and I hope that it works a little bit better than the online invasions just alone were in Watch Dogs 1.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's hard to say. And I think that was the other thing too that was kind of interesting, because with the first Watch Dogs game, like it was a really big deal, and it was really hyped up. Like this is a new approach, it's a new approach on the same old formula of the GTA open world type of game. But when it was actually released, it just wasn't very well polished. And you can kind of go wherever you want talking about Ubisoft and the problems they've had with releasing unpolished games. But that was kind of the bigger part of the letdown, was there was so much hype around it, and then it didn't deliver, which works well. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was dealing with that overhype, and like what kind of happens when a game is to be released, or is being premiered at E3 or whatever, and you want to hype up the game. You want to be like, this is going to be the coolest game ever because of these reasons. We've got these cool features. But how do you handle overhyping it? Like you're setting the bar so high that when it comes out, people are kind of let down. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure how you would really be able to deal with that thinking in the mindset of a developer if you were,
Right. Yeah, and I think some of it has to do with just the evolution of gaming over time. We're kind of in an era where there haven't been as many like huge paradigm shifts in terms of some of the game design, except for the move to more and more of a multiplayer focus. But, when you're talking about like a single player experience, the paradigm shifts really haven't been there for the past, 5 years or so. We had like maybe a decade or so ago, a large amount of like new, very interesting, like very different games come out with like these kind of open world style games like Just Cause, and then a little bit later on, we're talking about Watch Dogs and that kind of stuff, and the GTA style games. But nowadays it seems like more than anything, they're just being made bigger. There's more content, and the worlds are larger, but the fundamental way in which the players interact with the world, it maybe hasn't changed quite as much as the size and the scale and the scope of the game has. And so I think that's something that maybe developers are struggling with in terms of how to market their games, because to a certain extent, people have already seen a lot of these ideas before. There's just more of it. So what do they really have to generate an organic level of hype and excitement? And I think that kind of plays into like what ends up happening with overhyping and potentially even false advertising, like we see with No Man's Sky and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so when you have a system like a gameplay system like a GTA style game like Watch Dogs 2 or whatever, it isn't necessarily new. You can't say, oh, this is completely new, groundbreaking gameplay. So you have to hype up the aspects that make your game unique, because otherwise, it's not a whole like, okay, well, why don't I just go buy GTA 5? Because that's a huge game that's super, polished at this point. what makes me want to buy Watchdogs 2? Oh, well, there's this hacking mechanic, and there's this like, drop in, drop out multiplayer competitive aspect, and trying to sell those points without making them seem like, their core game mechanics. I think that sometimes can be a bit of like misdirection, where there's so much attention paid to these things like the multiplayer in Watch Dogs 2. Well, you don't know how much exactly that's going to factor into you playing the game in a single player session. And if you're playing offline, like, you don't have access to that online multiplayer stuff. So
yeah. So basically what we're seeing is that there's like a large incentive for the developer and the publisher in a lot of cases to focus so much of their attention and resources on those very minor features which differentiate their game, as opposed to maybe even the core gameplay elements, like we're seeing with these games that aren't maybe quite as polished, because they can still sell them with their unique gimmick almost in some cases.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know what? Let's not beat around the bush. Let's get into the nitty gritty. No Man's Sky. Like, that's been the huge kind of letdown of what I would say this year. I was hyped. I was pumped. 150,000%. It looked great. Everything I heard about it was so great. But there was all of this talk also about like multiplayer and things like that. And it was interesting because I actually heard about the multiplayer discussion. I didn't read it anywhere. I heard about it on I think it was on Crash Course Gaming, that it was lumped into an MMO category, and I was like, wait, it's a single player game.
That's not true at all.
And I was really confused about that, but I looked into it, and there were these like random sprinkles of multiplayer promises, or like maybe promises is the wrong word, but
it's like suggestions that there would be that some sort of content there.
Yeah, some sort of interactivity between other players. And I think that it's very possible that could have been occluded or like confused with being able to name planets and systems like as you discover them.
Yeah.
But I think by and large the biggest letdown with No Man's Sky was that it didn't really have gameplay. Like,
right.
The content, like, oh man, the procedural generation, I personally, I think that's really cool. And I think that all of the effort that went into that is something that's really great. And I think that's what makes the game unique in that regard. But
yeah, and that's what was so exciting about hearing it. They talk about creating the system of a procedurally generated universe, and we've seen some of that before. I think back to games like Spore, which in a lot of ways seem to be much more fully featured than No Man's Sky really ever could be. But it's interesting that, like, they set up this framework that they could have done a lot with in terms of making the world interactive and making the world dynamic. I think that's what we're seeing. You don't have to create a procedurally generated universe that has a ton of, like, every single detail is perfect and all that kind of stuff. You just need to make it so that the player can really interact with that universe in a way that's dynamic and like gives them that satisfaction of playing the game. And that's something that, like, No Man's Sky doesn't really have in the same way.
And to be fair, I think that that's something that's kind of hard to do in a game, in a large procedurally generated game, especially that's in space, where like you're this lone person going out and exploring the galaxy. It's going to be kind of hard to, make it feel like you're having an impact on the game world, which is space, so there's no real bounds to it. But like, being able to have, a home planet that you can influence or help develop, or, any sort of gameplay feature, I think that gives players a sense of investment into something is really great. Like, having a weapon that you can upgrade or a ship that you can upgrade, just it gives a lot of tie to something that doesn't necessarily have to take place in the game world. Because, when you, like I said, when you have a game that is as big on scale as No Man's Sky, it's going to be hard to give that sense of just like give the sense that the player is actually having an impact on the entire world. But finding a way that, like, even if it was something like some sort of trading system or anything, I guess it feels like that No Man's Sky, part of what happened with the hyping was it was marketed as an exploration game with like combat and this sense of discovery. And the letdown that kind of came with that was there's not really a whole lot of combat. You know, the flight mechanics are what in my experience bizarre. It feels very much like you're not flying on rails, but like you can't really do fun flying. Like I would want to be able to fly around the ground, like in between canyons and stuff, and explore the landscape of the planets. But like,
oh wow, you can't even do any of that.
You can't
See,
crash.
I haven't played it yet.
You can't crash. Like the game will not let you drive your ship straight into the ground. And
That's
yeah,
disconcerting.
I'm not the first one to say this. I've heard it mentioned elsewhere, but the thing that with No Man's Sky was it has a lot of, it had a lot of promise and it boasted a lot of content, but it kind of feels like a tech demo for the procedural generation. It doesn't feel like a game. There's not much playing. You go to a planet, you mine materials to get more fuel, to maybe, you know, sell or whatever, and then you go to the next planet, and it's kind of a rinse repeat. And the problem with the planets also is that they're so large that you don't really ever explore a lot of them, and there's no reason to, because the materials that you need are
just
plentiful.
about the resources.
Yeah, you're like, oh, here's this node of resources, let me, you know, shoot my mining thing, let me mine it, and then I'm good to go, I can fly away. There's no incentive to explore the planet. It, you know, with my limited experience with the game, there's not really like biomes on the planets. It's sort of like, here's this planet and this is the landscape, and you know, I don't know that you'd see anything new flying around the whole planet. Like, to do a full loop of the planet could take a long time, but why bother when you've basically seen everything you need to see already?
Yeah. I mean, I think really just this leads me to where I'm at with the gaming industry at this point, and that's that anything that comes out before a game's release, I take with a massive, massive, massive grain of salt. Because you just have to know that every one of these developers, and especially the publisher, maybe the developer, in a lot of cases, they do set out to make a great, fantastic game for the players, but definitely the publisher has an incentive to oversell and underdeliver. That's kind of always going to be the case, especially with how pre-ordering goes. You know, you'll see large sections of the gaming community in some senses speaking out against pre-ordering, or, you know, saying, you know, we're not going to pre-order anymore because of these issues, because of games coming out that don't have the features that were promised, or just really, you know, they sold something that is there kind of in name only, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what No Man's Sky is. I mean, with the issues with the multiplayer promises aside, because that clearly wasn't the case, but, you know, they promised this expansiveness, and we got literally a very expansive world, but we didn't get an expansive game. And I think that, like, in the advertising, those two, it's spoken about in a very misleading way, so that developers or the publishers, the advertisers, can talk about the expansiveness of the world or a feature without actually talking about the game and the gameplay and the experience itself.
Yeah, and I think that's something that was really done a lot in a lot of, you know, kind of, I guess, misdirected ways. They were able to discuss and say, like, there's all this content, everything's going to be generated and it's all going to be unique. And you're like, wow, this is so cool, I can't wait to interact with everything. Well, there's not much interaction. Like, and that's sort of one of the sticking points, I feel like. And, you know, it's not to say that the developers of No Man's Sky, like, it's not that they didn't do their best in making the game. You know, in talking about this, it's never to say, like, well, they just need to do better and make better games and add more content.
No,
it's
definitely
not. That's not what the discussion is about. The discussion is about how what they're making is interpreted. Because I feel like if No Man's Sky wasn't overhyped and sort of, you know, if the audience and, you know, prospective players didn't feel misdirected and misguided about what it was going to be, it could have been received in a totally different light and been much more of an enjoyable experience. I think, for me, thinking about it, there's a couple points. Like, one, it doesn't feel like it's worth $60. It doesn't feel like there's enough content or gameplay there to warrant a $60 game. $20, maybe $30 for, you know, an indie game of that scope. I think that's totally fair. Like, comparing, you have these space games, comparing No Man's Sky to Elite Dangerous, at least, there's much more content and gameplay in Elite Dangerous, and the base game's $30. They have a different expansion model. But to play the game, it's $30, and I would argue that there's more gameplay there than in No Man's Sky. But so I think that the price point was something that sort of, was hit wrong with people once they discovered there wasn't a whole lot of content there. But just also thinking about, like, it's fun to explore. I love exploring generated places and things, but when you're promised, so much more interaction, so much more combat, so much more gameplay, that it's hard. Like, I want to be able to step back from it and be like, okay, well, if I didn't hear all this hype, if I wasn't so, like, excited and ready to get it and just play and be blown away, would I have still bought it if it was just, hey, we've got this game that does tons of procedural generation and you can explore and, like, visit all of it, more of like a museum type of thing. Like, honestly, if you strip away the whole mining aspect of the game, like,
that's all it is. Yeah,
you don't need it. Right, the game could still be something great without that. It's how it's marketed, and I think that, like you said, it's not always in the hands of the developers to kind of make that call.
Yeah, and I think that what you're also speaking to is that there's somewhat of a symbiotic relationship between the community and the developer or the publisher and the advertiser in this case, because people were really excited about this kind of idea. There's a reason it got so much attention, right? It's not like some developer puts out an ad for a game that nobody wants and it gets overhyped because they promise a bunch of things. Like, it's that people want that kind of game. Like, and the people really want the kind of things that they're trying to make. And so I think that's the community ends up being really susceptible to these kinds of things for that reason.
Yeah, and I feel that Hello Games, the developers in No Man's Sky, I think that at least, I wasn't super involved following along with their development process, but it seemed like they were, fairly open and interactive with the community through their, like, Twitter and Facebook pages all along the way. There was the whole debacle about people being upset that the game was delayed, however many months it was. But, like, delays are something that I don't personally get upset about. I would rather a game be delayed and have it come out better. I don't know if that's necessarily the case here, but they seemed really open and connected with their community around the development of the game and all of that. So it might even make it feel a little more personal, because there was already that connection there. And they're like, okay, but we've been following along. You promised this, you promised that. Where's all my gameplay? Where's all my content? It feels like a personal attack, like the wool was pulled over the gamers' eyes in a way, just because they were seemingly so open about it early on. Yeah.
They sunk so much more into developing that relationship. Yeah. Well, I mean, and like I said, there's a reason that I was jaded about it, because I've seen that happen before. Because a lot of times that interaction with the community can somewhat either be a facade, or it can be kind of both at the same time. They can be sincere about wanting to connect with the community and tell them about the upcoming game and underdeliver at the same time. Like, that also just does happen. And I think it's really hard to, like, point the finger at any one group in particular in general. I think in this case, definitely I think Hello Games had definitely had a serious part to play in it. I think, sounds like Sony did as well, from what I can tell from the media that I'm seeing. But it really is interesting. It kind of, segueing a little bit, it makes me think of just games in general. And when they come out, I was actually thinking a little bit about Mass Effect 3, and kind of the disappointment that was had about the ending upon its initial release. Now, if you're not familiar with the series, Mass Effect is a space action-adventure RPG game. Started off more of as an RPG, but moved more into shooter and action game in the third iteration and second iteration as well. But it's a trilogy. And in the last game, upon its release, a large portion of the community was pretty upset by the ending. And I don't want to spoil it, but...
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but just they were not happy with it. It really didn't live up to the expectations of a lot of people. And I've been thinking about this for a while, because Mass Effect has been one of my favorite series of games.
Oh, yeah.
For many years.
Me too.
But I think, to some extent, it sort of had to happen this way. And I think we've talked about this a bit before. But I think when you get a series like that, when people are so invested in it, or, they want something out of it so badly, and, we see this kind of with how No Man's Sky was advertised, right? People wanted it so badly. when the product comes out, especially when you're like ending a trilogy that like people are so invested in, I feel like to a certain extent you're always going to have people be disappointed in it, right? Like it's ending. There's always going to be sadness, and I think people in some ways will find almost anything to point the finger at. And that's not to say that there wasn't issues with the ending and that maybe it was different from what people expected, but in some ways, like you have thousands of people, millions of people all coming in with different expectations. No matter what they would have made, some percentage of the people would have been pissed off and disappointed because it wasn't what they imagined Mass Effect to end like, right?
Yeah.
And I think we see this with lots of communities and lots of different kinds of games. I don't know. It was just something that I was thinking about when it comes to this overhyping issue, that it really is kind of a symbiotic relationship between the community and the developers and the publishers, in my opinion.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think that as the audience, as the consumers, as the gamers, we have a bit of a responsibility there too. Like if we get overhyped, then we kind of also have to keep ourselves in check. Like, I mean, you said you were sort of jaded toward No Man's Sky because you've been there with the overhyping of game releases and whatnot. But like you kind of have to check yourself a little bit. Like, you can't expect, No Man's Sky is going to like be the best thing in the entire world. Like it might sound bad, but I feel like you kind of need to set your expectations a little bit low. Like get excited, get pumped about it.
Yeah.
But, don't expect it to just completely blow your world away, because if it doesn't, then it's going to suck and you're probably not going to enjoy the game as much. But if you go into it excited to play a game that you've been looking forward to, but without, like, I guess, too many preconceived notions. And maybe that's part of the issue with an open communication with the community about the development cycle. Like, you have a game that is closed off. You don't know anything about it until here's a rough outline of the plot. You're
sort of going fresh in that sense.
Right. If that would have something completely different. Like, you still have to be able to hype it in some way to sell it. But to kind of remove that open connection might help that, and that sucks actually, because I love that connection. I love that sense of feeling a part of the development of a game, or just a part of a community rallying around a game that they're excited for or that they love. Like, and I think that was something that really was a struggle for the Mass Effect community when Mass Effect 3 came out, and there was kind of that letdown. But again, like, you have 2 games built up of content that, and as well, so in between Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, like, decisions you made and choices carry over into each game. So it's not like part 1, part 2, part 3. It's a Mass Effect 1 through 3 is the story. Like, it's one game spread across, 3 installations essentially. So yeah, there's going to be letdown. Like, you've been with these characters, with this story for such a long time, so many years, that it's going to suck when it ends. But at the same time, like, I think it's hard to satisfy everyone. And in regards to Mass Effect, like, I also was kind of disappointed by how it all went down. But, at least in that regard, I kind of have to offer up creative direction and freedom to the developers. It's their story. They're allowed to craft and tell it how they want to.
And it's very different having issues with the story compared to, like, the technological just existence of the game in the first place.
Yeah. So it's a little different, but I think that the hype in general, like, the hype, or maybe, I guess, lack of excitement towards something ending, I think that the biggest thing that causes issues is just preconceived notions and expecting games to deliver in a way that, they don't, or they might not even be able to. But
especially when they're promising like a huge paradigm shift, because that's the way I think about it, and that's, I think, the way you have to think about it when you're looking at game advertising. Let's say No Man's Sky, right? If No Man's Sky had come out as the game that sort of everyone was expecting it to be, it would have been a massive paradigm shift in open world games and how open world games were developed and advertised and played, right? Like, because of what everyone was expecting it to be. You can't know that someone is going to promise that someone is going to deliver that, even the person trying to deliver that can't know whether they're going to deliver that or not. Like when you're talking about changing like the fundamental nature of how like the gaming industry, or let's say any art form or any other industry, right, where you're producing a creative product like that, when you promise a paradigm shift, that's something that's always impossible to deliver because you're saying let's just change the whole structure of it. Well, you don't know if it's going to turn out good or not.
Right.
Like that's kind of the nature of experimental work and experimental games, and that's why we need the indie gaming side of things as well. But it just, for me, that's not something you can get so overhyped about. You can be excited, but you always have to have your expectations be tempered by the reality of knowing where the gaming industry is right now. You know, there aren't games coming out like No Man's Sky was saying it was going to be.
Yeah.
Those games don't exist. And maybe they won't exist in 2016. Maybe they won't exist until 2020. We don't know. We don't know until the first one comes out. And we won't really... And I don't think we can really ever trust anyone who says they can deliver that until it already exists and is available for us to play, honestly.
Yeah. It's difficult to kind of be able to predict the outcome of things. And when you're working on something, like, granted, I've not developed a game, but when you're working on something, you kind of have your own pair of rose-colored glasses you're viewing it all through. So, like, you know, there's a different attachment to the content, or if, you know, there's the possibility, like in the publisher's case, like, you know, we're going to make money off of this. This is the best thing since sliced bread. Like,
right.
But to find some sort of middle ground, like, I don't know, is it possible? Do you think that it's something that can be done with trying to hype releases and get people excited for selling them from a business standpoint, but not going so far as to create this huge letdown if and when the content doesn't deliver on every single point?
I don't know. I think the system needs different incentives for that to be the case. Because right now, you know, even if you start off from a position of selling only what you know the game is capable of delivering, well, at that position, you're going to be behind everyone else who is overhyping your game.
Yeah, right.
And who's to say that the community is going to believe you just because you can say, oh, well, I'm telling the truth about my game. They're just as likely to disbelieve you as anyone else. So in that sense, it's kind of a zero-sum game because everyone has an incentive to overhype, and you get kind of this snowball escalation effect going on.
So then how do we... Let's frame this in a different genre of gaming. Let's look at the yearly installation of like Call of Duty. How much hype goes into those? You know, I think that you like sports games sort of fall outside of the hype category because they fit the yearly installation model with the seasons of the games like that.
Yeah. That's
sort of already established. But you know, Call of Duty doesn't have any tie to anything, and yet we get one every year, and you know, people will argue that they're different, but by and large, the gameplay is the same. You know, values are changed, maps are different, guns are different, and whatnot.
Abilities are different, yeah.
Yeah, but like, what goes into hyping those? Is it just because they have this established, you know, connection already that like Call of Duty is this competitive shooter game that can come out every year and still like get people to buy it? Is it just because it already has that running repertoire with everyone that plays Call of Duty consistently? They're like, I've got to get the new one, you know, kind of like, I got to get the new iPhone, I got to get the new whatever. Is it just new is always better syndrome?
I mean, clearly
that
works. Clearly
Yeah.
that works. Like, people buy those things are sold in massive quantities, right? I think for Call of Duty as well, because of the way the multiplayer works, because the whole community shifts games every year, or like probably the majority of the community, like you don't really have a choice. It's the same with the parallel for like the EA Sports games, for example, the yearly installations there. If you want to play those in a multiplayer sense, like having FIFA 13 doesn't do you any good.
Yeah.
So I think you get some of that element as well, which sucks for the community. Like, you know, because then you're forced to buy a $60 game plus map packs. Like, how many map packs do each of these games have? How much money are you spending on a yearly basis?
I don't even know. I've lost count at this point.
Like, if you were to spend that same amount of money, you know, people talk about WoW being extremely expensive back in the day, but compare the cost. Like, is it really that much more when you're talking about comparing WoW, this massive, like, open world RPG game, to Call of Duty, where you're paying probably like at least $80, $100 a year as far as like DLC plus a yearly installation of the game? Maybe it's not that much more.
Yeah, I think that also just it has to do with like how you look at it in terms of spending money. Like for some people, it's easier to be like, oh, I'll drop $60 right now and then pay $40 later for the map packs, and then that's all I have to spend. Whereas if it's a monthly $15 subscription and then every so often $60 expansion, like that's like consistently sort of chipping away at something. Like, you know, it sort of depends on how you view spending, I think, at that point, as to which you feel is an appropriate framework. But again, you know, it's this battle that kind of sucks between the development of the games, the development of the content, and that creative wonderfulness that can happen, and then the business, you know, just pushing sales side of things as well. And it's different for AAA games from indie games, for sure.
Right.
But I feel like indie games are kind of being forced to go that route. It's almost like you have AA games now that are indie studios, like pairing with big publishers like Sony, trying to bridge this gap to get more sales, you know, because indie games they kind of are that nice framework that like, let's try something new, let's try something different, not develop it for 2 years, but, you know, make it so that it's new. You know, it might be kind of bare bones, but, you know, I don't know. I think that it's a rough game that developers often kind of get stuck in the middle of wanting to be creative, push new territory, but also being aware that like, hey, this needs to sell, and especially if there's like the publishing pressure as well.
Because at the end of the day, it takes a business and it takes finances and it takes investment to develop a video game. And it really doesn't matter, for the most part, what scale or scope of video game you're talking about. That's just kind of true across the board. So even for some of these smaller indie studios that we're talking about, unless you're literally just developing the game by yourself, you know, in your room, which is what I'm doing, but unless you're literally just doing that, it takes a business, and it takes being aware of your bottom line, and it takes being aware of, you know, how much you think your game is going to sell, and you have to be aware of all those things. And what that gets you is it gets you that set of incentives that I was talking about, you know, to push things and to hype things. You know, I think when we have this kind of almost like a fake indie sector in that sense right now, like you have like the real indie sector, which is, you know, people just kind of making games on their own, and that it like trickles up through the levels of the gaming industry, right? Then you have, like you were talking about, like these AA games where, you know, these larger publishers have realized that the community likes a lot of things about indie games, so they want to try and capture that and make money off of it. So they partner with the indie studios, but in the process of doing so, it probably eliminates a lot of what's good about the structure of that studio in the first place, potentially, you know.
Well, let's look at this real quick, thinking about Mass Effect 1. Like you said as well, Mass Effect 1 is definitely much more of an RPG game. There's a lot more levels and skills and things that add numbers to stuff. It's much less of a shooter gameplay. And that was released, what was
2008? 2007 maybe?
Yeah. And that was BioWare. And then when BioWare but now they're connected with EA.
Mass Effect 2 and 3.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how all that went down, but the gameplay shifted like significantly. And I'm not going to lie, by Mass Effect 3, it has incredible third-person shooter gameplay mechanics. Like, it's so much fun just to play the shooter mechanics of it. But I think what kind of happened as well is they stripped away a lot of the depth in the role-playing game side of it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of making those concessions like, okay, well, you know, this is going to sell better if it's just a shooter, if there's not a whole lot of other, you know, stuff behind the scenes that people have to worry about. You know, we don't want to confuse them with being able to explore a space. Let's like put them on a planet. They go through this linear maze, shoot some bad guys, and then they get to the end. And that was the disappointing part for me in seeing that shift. And
definitely.
I've felt strongly that it was because of EA's influence that that was sort of why Mass Effect 2 and 3 changed in that way, and was sort of, you know, the framework of it was changed. But I purely speculation. Like, you know, I have no actual.
And that's not to say that like Mass Effect 2 and 3 are bad games. No, they're still some of my favorite games. It's just interesting to see how things change. And again, I think with a series like Mass Effect, because of even how big the first game got and how much growth it was experiencing, some of these changes would have happened anyway, regardless of whether or not EA had stepped in the picture, in my opinion. You know, it's what happens when things start to grow. There's more at stake. There's more at play. There's more incentives. There's more people involved. There's more factors pulling at what makes the game and how it actually gets produced and published. So, like, you never get the same purity of creative drive and creative potential when you have a franchise that grows over time like that. It is always going to change over time.
Yeah, that's true. It's because, especially, I don't remember when Mass Effect 3 was released, but it's the kind of thing where if all three games were developed at the same time and it wasn't 1, 2, 3, if it was just like Mass Effect and all three games were like, put into one, then it might have been different. But you're right, like, they're developing a new game each time, basing it on the same story. And okay, Mass Effect 3 was released in 2012, so that's 5 or 6 years of time that was covered between Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 3. So it's hard to say that stuff wouldn't have changed anyway, and you can speculate until the world ends. But, I don't know. It's an unfortunate position that I feel sometimes game developers sort of get stuck into, where do we strip away content for the simplicity and for the fact that it might sell better, or do we, maybe make things a little more complicated? And I think that's why indie developers can get away with that, is because they can take those risks.
They have more freedom to kind of find the balance that works for their game. Because
Right.
It's not like, there's a right way to do that balance and a wrong way. It's more that I think for each game and the goals of each game and the intended audience of each game, that it's just different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like as we're talking about Mass Effect and some of these older games, maybe we can move into our nostalgia trip section.
Nostalgia tripping. No kidding.
I'm straight tripping.
Yeah. So nostalgia trip, it's not really a segment. It's just a way for us to talk about games because, I don't know, I get the nostalgia bug hardcore. Like,
Oh, definitely, me too.
thinking about games like Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, for me, Pokemon Crystal version, or even Blue version, just games that I've played in my childhood or
Original
growing
Smash
up.
Brothers.
Oh yeah, original Smash Brothers. Like, what the heck, even? But there's something about that. However, maybe unpolished it was, going back and playing it now, it's just like the feels that come with it, and that nostalgia power is too strong. For me, right now, my nostalgia trip is definitely Tales of Symphonia. It's a JRPG game originally released on the GameCube back in some date and time. I'll look that up here real quick. But, GameCube era. The reason this has popped back up for me is because they ported it, I believe it was. August 29, 2003 is when Tales of Symphonia was released. I don't know how recently, but it's on Steam now. And just a week
I have to check that out.
Yeah. Just like a week or so ago, I think it was on sale for like $7. And I was like, yeah, I'm buying it. Why? I don't know. I still I have my Tales of Symphonia sitting next to my GameCube right now. Like, I could play it there, but it's something about like the HD, whatever. I haven't even like downloaded it yet. I was just like, I need to have this. The nostalgia is too strong. But anyway, so Tales of Symphonia is just this like 60-hour JRPG game, as it goes, that I don't even know how to describe it. The story is so roller coastery, but what makes the game so fun is the characters that are there. And
Yeah, definitely.
Like I haven't played many of the quote unquote Tales series games. I also never played Tales of Symphonia 2 because I was scared. I was scared it was going to ruin the original experience for me. But it just, the characters were so fun. The interaction between the characters was so well written. There was voiced dialogue, and then there's unvoiced dialogue, and then there's cutscenes that can happen depending on things you've done in the game, or places you've been to, or places you're currently at.
Yeah, those little text interludes that you can unlock. I think that really made that level of immersion for me. Seeing the characters just talk about random stuff, the food that they were eating. It definitely added a level of immersion to the game and like of depth to the characters, especially because they would just randomly happen as you like wandered around the map sometimes.
Yeah, some of them were random based on who was in your party or who wasn't. Some of them were location based, like visiting, like on the main map. If you're outside of some village, a conversation might trigger there. But it's great, and it was implemented in such a great way because a little notification comes up in the corner of the screen, and you can push the Z button to start, the cutscene, and it's just picture boxes of their faces and then text of them speaking. But it's not just like text. The little picture boxes move, they bump into each other, like they're animated, their faces change in good JRPG style. So it adds a little bit more to it there. But the great thing about it is like, if you didn't care, it didn't interrupt the game for you. You weren't forced into these cutscenes where like, okay, now I've got to listen to these characters talk for another 5 minutes.
Metal Gear Solid 2-hour final cutscene.
Right. It allows you, if you're interested and if you want to get more depth and more background on the characters and how they interact with each other. Like, one of the cutscenes I remember was of the main character, Lloyd, and the dog. And it's literally Lloyd basically talking to himself and the dog's dog, in quotation marks, because it wasn't a dog, or maybe it was in this, whatever. And the dog just whines.
JRPG animal.
Yeah, with the ear things. But the dog whines, and that's all the dog's text is whining. And Lloyd is talking at the dog. It's just, I don't know, little things like that really make the game cool.
It's the little things. It's those little touches.
Yeah, definitely. What I know, because you played Tales of Symphonia as well.
Mostly with you, yeah.
Yeah, did you ever beat it, or did I end up beating it on my own?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I played much of the second disc. I think I really only played this game on the GameCube was on 2 discs, which is interesting. But yeah, I don't think I ever played much of the second disc. I only played the first disc.
Okay. Yeah, the game definitely, throws some punches at you and takes you through the ringer in a great way. Like, it's definitely me remembering the story. It's like you're watching a movie, but you're getting to play it. There's good drama, there's bad drama, and you care about it because you care about the characters. Like, honestly, there's the whole, hey, the world's in peril aspect, of course, because it's a video game. But you care about it not necessarily because you're saving the world, but because you're getting to go on this journey and this adventure with these characters. And for me, like, that was the biggest incentive to do like side quests and things, was because I got to learn more about them. And
yeah, definitely.
They were so fun to play as and go along with that adventure.
It's interesting, just thinking about nostalgia trips in general, that, a lot of the newer, more story-focused games that come out these days, it's harder for me to get into them. And I think, some of that is that the market is kind of saturated with lots of games. But I think, there really just is kind of something to the nostalgia of one of the first games that really gave you that sense of wonder in the story that you could interact with, that you were a part of, that you could shape with your decisions. And definitely a game that really stood out to me that, had that impact where you could shape it with your decisions was Knights of the Old Republic, which is another BioWare game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And it's an RPG game, third person, but it was definitely one of the earlier games that had a really fleshed out, good and evil, like light and dark side of the Force system. But it really changed the storyline, especially as you got later on into the game. And again, I don't want to spoil this, although it's super old, but it changed the entire composition of your party. It changed who the bosses were. It changed who your allies and enemies were in the story. Like, especially as you get later into the story, and those elements, like, really, I think, were one of the first exciting things that people started to see about, kind of the modern era of gaming and the changes that were happening, throughout the mid 2000s and into like 2010. Right, people were seeing a lot of these more interactive, dynamic elements in games, and maybe that's what part of what played into games even like No Man's Sky on the other end of the spectrum, like we're talking about earlier. Feeding into that hype. It's kind of interesting to me how progress in some ways has been made, but also hasn't been made, because I'm still like identifying these older games as kind of the primary examples of these themes and these features that I really enjoy.
Yeah, well, and so Knights of the Old Republic, an amazing game. Like, it stands the test of time as incredible story, as incredible just characters, and yeah, everything. And it was really, I agree, one of those first games, at least that I'm aware of, that had that whole good and evil concept and like decision influencing thing that really like it impacted how the story went. And I mean, there were definitely some earlier JRPGs that did that as well, but not like Western gaming made it. And so Knights of the Old Republic was made by BioWare, who also made Mass Effect. And so it's interesting also kind of seeing how they started with that sort of like good, evil, light, dark, Paragon Renegade thing in as that went into Mass Effect. But,
Yeah. It's interesting that it got like slimmed down in some ways, I think. Because the abilities were so different. Like your entire ability set changed in some ways in Knights of the Old Republic, depending on which side of the Force you were on. And some of that was just the game system that they were using. But it's interesting to see that evolution over time.
And I wonder how much exactly that lends to, I guess, the frontier of gaming. Everything was new back then. Like, okay, not everything, but like there was a lot less territory that had been treaded. So, like you're saying, there's a lot of saturation with like story-rich. Well, maybe not saturation with story-rich games, but saturation with just games on the market. Like, I feel like anyone who has a Steam account and has had it for more than a year has a lot of games they've bought that are on sale and are just kind of sitting there that haven't been played. I have at least 50 that I haven't played yet because I was like, oh, I've wanted to play this, and I just haven't gotten around to it for whatever reason, because there's so many games out there. And I think that sort of influences the attention span. Like, for one, when we were younger and there was not like the whole working thing and all of this other life stuff that had to be done.
It was a lot easier.
Yeah, it was a lot easier to sit down and kind of get engrossed in a game. I think it also kind of carried with it a little bit of that like childlike wonder, even in like high school and middle school years, where it was just like, this is so cool that I, am experiencing this story, this other world. It's like reading a good book, except you're there, you're seeing it, you're like creating the story essentially by playing the game. And so I think that lends a lot to the nostalgia of these older games, but that now that, there's maybe less time in the day to sit down and really get engrossed in a story game, we're drawn more towards either quick competitive games or games that don't take a whole lot to get into, mobile gaming, not to go down that road, but things that are just quicker to pick up, play a little bit, and put down, because we don't have as much time to dedicate to it. And we've seen a lot. I don't know that there's going to be any brand huge new developments in gameplay or game design that come out aside from like VR, but that's kind of a bit different because it's been around. Like Tales of Symphonia was 2003. I'll look up when KOTOR was released, but like I think that it's been done. Can we get to the point where there's things that reignite that childhood spark? And maybe that's why nostalgia is so important, like to go back and relive what we had then. Like Pokemon Crystal version for me was my personal first Pokemon game, and I know I played that for well over 300 hours across like 2 character saves, and it saddened me when I went to turn it on and like my save was gone and the battery was dead, and I was just like,
no.
We've gotten to that point, but I don't know.
I mean, people bag on nostalgia, but I think there's a lot of value there, definitely. And I think we're kind of in an amazing era for gaming nowadays. I think some of what we're saying now sounds kind of depressing. It's harder to get into new games. The market's so saturated. But in some ways, we're in an amazing era for gaming. The amount of older games that are available to play in remastered or like HD versions on Steam or through different collections on any number of consoles. Just there's never been a point in the history of gaming, where there were more games available to play than now.
That's really true.
And I think that's something that we also have to keep in mind and appreciate, because, we can go back and, like we were saying, and play Tales of Symphonia and play Knights of the Old Republic. We've been talking about setting up Battlefront 2 and going and playing that online if we can get it working. Yeah. Like, all these things, I just think that's what is so amazing and wondrous about technology and where gaming is at now, is that we have all these older games still, and now we have the new stuff. And I think that's really, as far as like what needs to happen differently in the gaming industry, that's what they need to acknowledge and be aware of, is that you already have this massive library of games that exist. And if your game isn't really adding something to that, isn't really adding to what types of experiences and what kinds of experiences have, then really it's just a rehash. And there's going to be something else that maybe did it better, or maybe did it in a way that's going to be more appealing or less expensive.
Yeah, and Knights of the Old Republic was released in 2003 as well, so it kind of fits into that era, I guess. But I think that you're totally right, and I think that's a really good way to look at it, that, you know, it's kind of... It can be easy for quote-unquote gaming veterans to feel kind of jaded, like, oh, there's all this garbage gaming content that's coming out now, blah, blah, blah. And like, oh, nostalgia, indie game for life things. But like, I think that if there's something about a game that makes it fun and kind of draws you in, like, you know, whether it's the gameplay and the decision-making aspects like was in Knights of the Old Republic, or the characters and their interactions like in Tales of Symphonia, it's those things that might not even necessarily be expected to draw you into a game that can and do. Mm-hmm. Like, it's less nostalgia, but just kind of going off of that. The Tomb Raider reboot, the first one, it felt like I was watching a movie. Okay, yeah. Everyone complained about all the QTEs, or the QuickTime events where you have to push a button, you know, to not die or do a thing so you don't just like immediately die in the middle of a cutscene. But I kind of liked that. And I'm not like a proponent for QuickTime events. I think that they kind of are detracting in some regards, but it actually
worked for that game. Yeah,
it did, and I was surprised, and I was pleasantly surprised, and it really kept me going through the whole game, and I felt like I was like watching a movie that I also got to play. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that sometimes things can surprise you about games, and it just has to have that aspect that kind of pulls you in, whether it's a huge AAA game or a small indie game.
Yeah, and I think you also have to think about just how the audience for games have changed over the history of gaming. You know, 20 years ago, gaming was much more of a niche hobby. The gaming audience was much smaller, right? And so now you have so many different kinds of people who play games and get something different out of games. And so it just makes sense at the end of the day that like there's going to be a higher percentage of games that come out that maybe you have no interest in, or like when you play it, you think that they suck, or like you don't care about them at all, right? But that just means that they're made for somebody else. They weren't made for you, and that's okay. And as the audience gets larger and really blossoms, right? Or like the gaming industry blossoms into like all these different types of games. And I think we're just going to see it proliferate more and more and more as we go into the future. As that happens, that yes, there are going to be more games that each individual person doesn't like, but there are also going to be way more games that they do like.
Yeah, and it allows for a lot more options too. And mm-hmm. I think that that's also a really good point. And that's a nice positive way of looking at it. And you saying that, describing how, you know, okay, well, maybe that game that it isn't for you. There's another game out there that's going to fit for you and draw you in that way, and it might not be one you expect, or the game that you were hoping would draw you in might not. And we kind of unintentionally discussing No Man's Sky bashed on it a little bit, but like there's plenty of people out there that enjoy the game and like playing it, mm-hmm. and yeah, that's great.
It wasn't what we were expecting, and it wasn't what parts of the community were expecting, but there's probably lots of people out there who love what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that some of going along with like the development of games, if that is given a bit more intention, like, you know, so if they're making Tales of Symphonia 3, for example, like character interaction is really important, and the character's writing and dialogue is really important. So, you know, focusing on that aspect of it to draw people in while not like neglecting the other aspects of it. And I think that, you know, trying to make the strong points of your game stronger, but also like not neglecting the other parts, which I feel might have happened with No Man's Sky a little bit. But at the same time, not trying to make a game that's going to appeal to everyone, I think is a really good point too, because
mm-hmm. knowing your audience.
Yeah, knowing your audience. That's really a good point, because you can't make something that'll appeal to everyone. If you do, you're going to get kind of bland, washed out content and gameplay that's probably going to be less interesting for everyone involved. So I don't know. There's so many facets to it. It's it's great, but also just terrifying at the same time.
I would say that the games that have been the most successful at kind of appealing to everyone have been games where, you know, they're kind of constructed in layers that you can kind of enter the game at one level of depth and it holds up. But then you can, like, the game sort of like organically adds more difficulty to itself.
Like side quests and things.
Yeah. Actually, a game that sort of I always hear as an example of this is Cave Story.
Yeah.
And that's because of like the different bosses and endings that are available depending on like which routes you take or the difficulty of the routes that you take, right? And so it definitely offers that sort of like organic player growth element. And like platforming games in general are really good for that, right? Because it's your player skill that's improving as you advance through challenges.
Yeah. I don't know. It's cool just in general, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's good that we have games to go back to with nostalgia, but it's also good that we have probably way too many games to look forward to, and not enough time.
Probably won't play.
Yeah, and that's
Ever.
I guess that's kind of a sad fact of things as well. But I mean, you know what? We might not get to, but someone else is going to, and they're going to enjoy it. So,
yep. All right, shall we move into our fun little game here?
Our fun little game here. So, okay, we don't have any cool like musical intro for this or any this is called mystery sound. I think we've decided, and basically, so we've picked out 3 either sound effects or like music clips from games that we know the other person's played, and we have to try and guess what they're from. And maybe we'll give hints, maybe we'll be stubborn, you know, I don't know. There's not really a whole lot of rules. It's just
we'll create rules as we go along. We'll make
as we go along, and as
all the best games are developed that way, right?
Yeah,
make up the rules as you go along.
Yeah, that's how that works, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's go ahead and
Yeah, exactly.
So what do we want? We want your mystery clip 1.
Sure.
Sound I'm
Let's
going to
do
play.
it.
Okay. I don't
So
know how
this is
loud
for you
this
to
is going
guess.
to be. Yeah. So I'm going to try and blah. I'm going to try and guess Quacticle's mystery clip 01. We'll see how loud this ends up being. But okay, here it goes. So, thanks for giving me an easy one. 100%. That's from Kirby and the Crystal Shards.
Ding, 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 ding.
I'm trying to place it, and for some reason, I think it's the introduction. Like if you don't push start on the title screen.
Yeah, it's the intro cutscene.
Okay.
Where the fairy, I forget her name, is like riding around on the crystal, and the eye is like shooting at her.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of nostalgia, oh man,
Yeah, that's definitely what I was thinking about when I came up with that clip.
so strong the nostalgia. Yeah, Kirby and the Crystal Shards it's great.
N64.
Yeah, good stuff. Oh man, now I want to go and play that. See, this is the downside to the nostalgia thing. Is that like
then you have like 10 million games that you want to play, and you're like, oh, I want to play all of them. Help! I can't deal with this.
yeah, not only the new games. Now I'm like, oh great, now I've got all these old games that I also want to play. What do I do?
Help!
Okay, so I've got my first mystery sound clip for you. I have sound effects. So
Okay.
This is not so much a sound effect as it is a clip from a game, but here we go. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So my brain is either thinking GTA 4 or Just Cause 2, but I can't I think it's Just Cause 2. I'm gonna go with Just Cause 2.
Well, that is actually from GTA 4.
Damn it!
But no, like totally, you're right. Just Cause 2, it would be kind of the same. That was a
Just the scream.
That was Nico, my cousin, being launched from the windshield of a car.
So kind of similar to what would have happened in Just Cause 2.
Kind of similar, except you would have fallen off the wing of an airplane as it crashed into the ground, and 15 cars exploded from C4, and a water tower fell over at the same time.
So we're starting off with softballs, but I think I should get an honorable mention for that one.
No, yeah, it was a little bit, either one. I think you did.
One of mine
splendidly.
is difficult in a similar way. So
Okay, well, I think all of mine are difficult because it's not. They're all just like sound effects. But okay, so I'll move on to mystery clip number 2 from The Quactical. I'll go ahead and play this. Oh. Wow.
like those nice little fade outs I added at the end.
Oh, yeah, you actually edited yours?
Yeah.
Oh, whoops. I didn't.
Because I'm better. Holla.
Clearly. Shoot, I kind of recognize it, but at the same time, like,
This is the hard one.
this is the hard one. What system?
GBA. Game Boy Advance.
GBA? What?
Yep.
Oh, well then there goes.
I don't
goes
know
any
if
of my
we
thoughts.
actually played it on that system though. We might have played it on an emulator.
I'm drawn a blank. Throw me a bone or two. A soft bone.
It actually has very similar combat to the Civilization games.
Is that Advance Wars?
Yes.
No way.
Yep. Maybe that was too much of a hint, but I also thought it was sort of obscure. So
No, which Advance Wars was that clip from?
I'm not sure, but it was Andy's theme. Just Advance Wars GBA.
Oh, okay. Cool. Wow. Dang. Yeah, that's been a long time since I played that. That was a pretty fun game.
Yeah.
We did play
Yeah, because
that.
we played the hot seat multiplayer on an emulator.
Yeah, you're right. That is pretty cool. It's been a while actually since there's been an Advance War game, hasn't there?
Yeah, I actually haven't really followed it, but
The last one I remember was for the DS. I don't know that there's been a 3DS one. They kind of like made it a bit less cartoony and a bit more like nitty gritty. I don't remember what the tagline was of it, but
I'd be interested to try it out though. Yeah.
nice. That was a good one. I like that.
Yeah, I've definitely gone with the nostalgia theme for these clips here.
Cool. Mine are sort of all over the case, all over the place.
All over the case.
All over the case, all over the mental case. Okay, so this next one might be kind of difficult too. I don't know. So we've got 2 sound bites, like just little sound effect clips that I'm going to play. And I'll play you the first one, and then I'll play the second one. And if you need me to replay them, I can. They're just 1 second long. So.
Alrighty. What? Excuse me? You what, mate? Can you play them again, please?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, what? My brain's actually thinking like Mario Party?
Nah. It's a
need a hint.
PC game.
Oh my gosh. Oh man, I need more hints, man. This is bad.
So it's a PC game. It's one of your favorite genres of games.
Play it again? That makes me think roguelike. Is that
game
from
itself-
Isaac? Is that from Binding of Isaac?
No, the game itself is pretty silly. There's vending machines.
Oh man. What? I have no idea.
The game can get so hard that it's really dreadful. Dreadful.
Deadly Rooms of Death?
No? You what's something that you is under a castle? Or
Oh,
like that you-
Dungeons of Dreadmore. There we go.
Yeah.
Wow, you really had to spoon feed me that one.
Well, it was pretty obscure, but I was like, I wanted to. It's the Diggles.
Oh, the friggin' Diggles. Oh, but it was a roguelike.
Yeah. So
Oh,
it's,
man.
the first sound effect is the Diggles, like a group when you like encounter them in a room, and then the second one was them attacking or casting a spell.
Oh, man. Well, I get an epic fail for that one.
Yeah, but I mean, it was pretty. Like I said, the sound effects are kind of hard, but I mean,
Yeah.
it was
the
fun
music
listening
clips, I think you get a little bit more just like ambient understanding of what was going on.
and context.
Yeah.
But it's fun to listen to you struggle.
I hate you. Well, my last one is the sound effect, so
Okay, cool. So
it's
this is
probably going to be easy, but maybe difficult. I don't know.
probably easy, but maybe difficult. All right, so I'll go in with no expectations, and I won't be overhyped. Okay. Oop. It's a pistol. Hold on, I need to listen to this again. Oop. It's a pistol from a Halo game,
But which Halo game?
but which Halo, I'm not sure.
I just love that clip because you have the pistol and then you have like the slight like elite grunt right at the end.
Yeah. It's not Halo 3 because it shoots too fast.
This is the hard part, obviously.
Okay, I'm going to play it again. Oop. I'm thinking Halo 1. It could be Reach, but I'll put my money down on Halo 1 pistol.
And you would be correct.
Oh.
Wow. Nice. So does that mean you're 3 for 3?
No, I didn't really get the Advance Wars one.
Okay.
That was a bit.
Past a certain number of hints. Our unofficial rule is if you ask for too many hints, then you suck. That's what happens. That's the result, is that you suck.
I think that's valid. I think that's
All right.
fair.
So I got one more.
Yeah, one more for you. Here goes. Yeah, I'll just hit play. Fitting for Halloween.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Again, I really fail at this and I have no idea. Play it again?
Yeah.
I don't know. What system? Can you give me an idea?
GameCube.
GameCube. It almost sounds like a Ganondorf laugh. Like, but
Kind
I
of.
don't think so.
It's also a nostalgia trip for us.
I honestly want to say like some sort of. I either want to say like it sounds like Ganondorf to me. I don't know why. So I guess I would say Melee, Smash Bros. Melee.
You are correct.
Wow,
Do you-
was it Ganondorf?
No, it's Master Hand.
Oh, well, success through failure.
Success. I mean, hey, there you go. Yeah, it's I was trying to find actually the clip when you defeat him, but that was just like a really demented like screaming noise. So I went for the evil laugh instead. I felt that was a little bit less terrifying. But
Well,
I was
my
like,
gamer
hey,
cred has been completely removed for not knowing what Ganondorf sounds like.
well, I think that's fair. Like it could be. It was just there's a lot of reverb on it, but again, I'll throw you some sound or some music clips next time to even things out a little bit. But hey,
Yeah, those sound clips are a little bit more difficult, I think.
Yeah, but they're fun when they're like the Diggle one was fun. That was fun listening
Yeah.
to you struggle on that one. I like that. That actually, that was a lot more. I mean, not that I was anticipating it wouldn't be fun, but like, I don't know. It was more fun than I was expecting. I wasn't overhyped for the mystery sound segment.
Too hype to handle.
Can't handle this hype train.
I mean, I can't handle a whole train by myself anyway. It takes at least 10 or 15 people to lift that up. Those things are pretty heavy.
The real question then is, why are you lifting trains?
Why can't I hold all these trains?
It's a good question.
It's
a good question. A relevant question? Not at all. A good question? Yes.
All right. Well, it sounds like we're wrapping it up here.
Yeah, I would say so. But that was fun. Like, look at us.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. We've got this first episode down for our Tune Into Gaming.
Episode 1.
Like podcasting. This is fun. I've enjoyed it. I'm now that we're at the end, I'm significantly less nervous than I started out being. I don't know about you.
Something like that. But yeah,
Something
make sure
like
to
that.
check out our Twitter at tuneintogaming.
Yeah, and as well, if you listen to this and you want to comment at us and don't want to use Twitter, you can email us at tuneintogaming@gmail.com. Whether it's like a question or a comment, or you think that we both suck at identifying sounds, or actually,
But that's definitely true.
If you really want to do something cool, send in a sound or a music clip and see if I don't know, one of us can grab it out of the email or from Twitter and give it to the other one or something. I don't know. we can maybe figure that out. That might be kind of cool to get some listener submitted stuff.
Or we can make it into like a community guess where we guess on the episode and then the community tells us for the next episode.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. So something like that. I don't know. Email, tweeter us, all that good stuff. Yeah. So at tuneintogaming or
Twit.
tuneintogaming@gmail.com. Either one of those are good.
I hope you've enjoyed listening.
Yeah.
I'm Quactical.
And I'm North Kozar. And I don't have a mic to drop because I'm wearing a headset, but
Tune out.
tune it. Oh, that's
Yeah.
that's our closing.
Yeah.
We just made our closing.
Tune out.
Great.